Tom Pace from Talk of the Town. Today over here at the Caddo Registrar of Voters office on Marshall Street as we have your fall election update for 2016. If you notice, things have now just increased in activity. It's like a beehive behind me because they're getting ready for the big election coming up on November the 8th. So I'm here to tell you that all this is happening today, and if you want to register to vote, Ernie, what's going on?
Well, Tom, we're glad to have you here. We do have some deadlines coming up. They're really important. We're getting the ballots ready to be mailed for the military, and a lot of things happening. But the most important things, three things we got to talk about. Number one, last day to register is coming up real quick, October the 11th. So by the time we have this on caddovoter.org, it'll be even closer, but we have that coming up October the 11th, and then following 2 weeks later, early voting starts October the 25th through November the 1st, except we're closed on the intervening Sunday, which I think is October 30th. And then the election, November the 8th for president. So we're talking about a real short calendar from here, less than 2 months, and we should have a new president coming in, or at least a president-elect, let's put it that way, coming up real quick.
If I'm hearing you correctly, there's a lot of things that need to occur, and if one wants to have an application in, what's the deadline for that?
It's going to be October the 11th, and there are a couple of different ways, of course, you can register to vote. So let's talk about those. Number one, of course, you can register in person, and that's by coming to our office at 525 Marshall, and we're open from 8 to 4:30 each day. And on the last day, of course, we close at 4:30. Anybody in line by 4:30 will get to register to vote, but you could mail in your application, and we have them at all the libraries. There's one place you can go and pick up an application, and if need be, we'll mail you one if we have time. We'll actually mail you the application to fill out and mail back to us, but it has to be postmarked by October the 11th. So in other words, if you go to the post office that last day, you got to make sure they actually postmark it while you're there. Ask them to go ahead and stamp it as having been mailed October the 11th. And then, of course, electronically, which is getting to be more and more popular. But there are a couple of things with electronic registration, Tom. Number one, make sure that if you're going to register to vote electronically, you go to caddovoter.org, caddovoter, all one word, .org, or go vote, but it's spelled the South Louisiana way, GEAUX, and then VOTE, but it's all one word, govote.com, because both of those link directly to the Secretary of State's office, and that's the key thing. Don't go to any other site. Go to either caddovoter.org or govote.com, but that application has to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on October the 11th. Literally the next moment, we have to hold it over to the next election. So very important if you're going to do that, go ahead and do it now. There's no reason to wait. You can go ahead and get it done. You're going to need your driver's license or Louisiana Special ID if you're going to do it electronically, because there's an audit code right beside your picture, and that's what we use for fraud prevention. So make sure you do that.
Okay, Ernie, here's a thought. I know there's a lot of registration groups out there that are trying to get people to sign up to vote. What about those groups? Are they good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I always say to people, please register with the registrar's office. Of course, we've been out, we've done over 100 registration sites at libraries. If you see a registration group and you want to register with them, that is kind of on you, because we know sometimes we don't get all the applications, unfortunately. So the best thing to do is, if it's a local group like a church group, they are probably a lot more responsible than some guy walking around the gas station or in a parking lot somewhere wanting to register to vote. And Tom, the real problem is it doesn't matter who you register with, you're actually giving them your personal and private information. You're not only giving them your address, but your birth date, your last four numbers of your Social Security, as well as your mother's maiden name. It's all somebody would need to take your identity, and we don't want that to happen. So register with us. Call us, we'll mail the application to you, or come here to our office, 525 Marshall.
Well, do you notify someone, though, if their application is incomplete?
We do. If you have left something off, let's say you didn't put your mother's maiden name, then we will send you a notice in the mail. And when you get something from the registrar's office, it's usually a card or a letter, and take it seriously, because we normally are on a 10-day deadline on whatever we mail to you. If it's not answered in 10 days, your application is rejected, and I don't want that to happen to anybody. So it's really important, if you get something in the mail from us, call us, give us the information if possible, if it's just something you can answer over the phone. But also, Tom, if you get your voter ID card, or your voter information card, as they call it now, when you get that, look down there and see where you're going to vote. Where you go to vote is on that voter information card. Make sure you save it. Put it in your purse or in your wallet or whatever. Make sure you save it, because on election day, that could be a real big ticket for you to be able to get to vote if you have that card.
And again, today we're talking with Ernie Robertson, Caddo Parish Registrar of Voters, about your application and registering to vote in this very important election coming up November the 8th. Ernie, should someone check their registration even if it was what they used and voted last year?
Absolutely, Tom. We've already had the canvass since last year, so sometimes people get changed in the canvass, and we use the information from the post office, and unfortunately, sometimes, like everything else, computers make mistakes. So make sure you check it. Go to caddovoter.org. You can check it electronically. Just click on Where Do I Vote or Am I Registered? Or you can call us. 226-6891. We'll be glad to check it over the phone for you as long as we have time. But as you know, Tom, things are picking up, and Charlie out here, who's answering the phone, is on the phone constantly now, answering questions about the election, answering questions about registration. But please, call us if it need be.
Here's one of the questions I think a lot of people want to know. Can a former felon vote?
Well, they can, once they have completed the terms of their sentence or incarceration, probation, parole, whatever's involved. They go to the probation parole office. If they do not have a copy of their release letter, because they're going to need their release letter is number one. Number two, they're going to need an ID, and you need to have a Caddo address. And you bring both of those items. You have to appear in person with your release letter and your ID, and you come into the office, and we will either get you reactivated or signed up registered to vote, whichever your case may be. And former felons can register to vote. It's not like it was years ago when they couldn't. They now can register to vote, and we want to make sure everybody knows what the process is. You got to have your release letter from probation and parole, and you've got to have an ID and come in person.
And so you do need your Louisiana ID?
You will for that. You'll need a Louisiana ID and proof that you actually live in Caddo, too, if that ID that you do have doesn't happen to have the address on it.
All right. So you need your Louisiana ID to register to vote, and it's election day. All of a sudden, it's election day, and all of a sudden, you forgot your ID. Can you still vote?
Right. There is a provision in the law. It's kind of the safety net provision that if you don't have your ID, you can confirm your identity at the polls. On the poll list will be your mother's maiden name and your birth date, two things you'll easily know. And you can provide that information, fill out what's called an affidavit. And by voter affidavit is how you vote, and you vote by voter affidavit. And you can vote at the polls on election day if you forget your ID. Same story during early voting. And that varies, Tom, usually based on how many people actually show up as to how many people forget their ID. But it's not unusual for us during an early voting period, to have 5 or 6 people who forget their ID, don't have it with them, and so we vote them by what we call affidavit.
So it would be a provisional vote, but it's
No,
still
it's a real vote. Now, whenever you do the affidavit, it's different from provisional voting, and we'll talk about provisional voting. But you actually go to the machine because what that means is they have found you on the poll book. And I think that's the next question that you might want to ask me is about the poll books.
and that's exactly right. Because of that, tell me about it.
Well, this gets a little complicated, but if you go to the polls and you have your ID, or if you don't have your ID, and you show your ID or you tell them your name and all, and they can't find you on that poll book, that means one of three or four things. Number one, it could mean you went to the wrong poll. That's the first thing. You might be at the wrong poll. In other words, maybe you do vote at this location, but there may be more than one polling place in that location. In other words, like at Huntington, there are 3 actual precincts that vote at the Huntington polling place. You may have been in the wrong line. Second, you go to, say, Grace Church. There are 5 precincts at Grace Church. So you may have been in the wrong line. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you may have been changed and you don't know it because you got caught in the canvas and your address has been changed from what it was last year. That's why you always need to check to see, where do I go to vote? Most important thing you can do for Election Day, where do I go to vote? Check on caddovoter.org. The next thing, too, may be that you have wound up and you're just not registered. You may have been canceled at some point. You don't know about it, mainly because you probably moved, didn't vote in 2 federal general elections, or an inactive voter, and you've been removed from the polls. Again, Tom, go to caddovoter.org, check. If you don't have a computer, don't know how to do that, call us, 226-6891. We can tell you before October 11th what needs to happen. You may need to get re-registered. You may need to change your address. You may have been registered in Bossier, and now you're here in Caddo. Or you were in Caddo, moved to Bossier for a while, now you've moved back. You're probably going to have to re-register because we've probably had a canvass, and we found out that you were actually in Bossier. A lot of reasons why. If you're not on the poll book, it can mean a lot of different things. But the way to solve that before Election Day, check and make sure that you're going to the correct polling place.
All right, now here's one that everybody always asks me about. Military people, because they could be deployed overseas. When are the military ballots mailed out?
The military ballots by federal law are mailed out 45 days before the election. So September 24th is what we call the drop dead date. Great law. I was totally supportive of it. Lets us print all the ballots early. And I do want to point out to everybody that all the ballots are already here in the registrar's office, and they've been here a couple of days, and we're getting them all secure from the standpoint of the way we secure the ballots. And that was all done by the Secretary of State in spite of the storm and flooding in Baton Rouge. They've done a heroic job in getting all of this done. And next week, we'll be working with the new scanning information they're having up here. So everything's going fine. I did want to point that out. No hiccups in the election so far. For the military, their ballots go out and they get to vote. Military only, they get to vote by email if they so choose, or they can vote by paper ballot, which will be mailed to them by whatever means necessary to get it to them at whatever location they are throughout the world, as well as we have overseas voters who fall in that same category, what we call UOCAVA voters. And so all of them will get their ballots in plenty of time to vote, and that all happened after the 2008 election. Great new law that came in, used in 2012, been used in every federal election, and we will get those done. We'll be down here on that Saturday in case we get any last-minute emails requesting ballots or information in. We're going to take care of it for the military.
Oh, and by the way, what about those seniors that are 65 and older that you mail out to? Is that still going on?
Oh, yeah, and we will mail out more than anybody else. We'll probably well in excess of 4,000, maybe as many as 4,500 or so, that we will mail out, and those will all go out once the military goes out. That's the great thing about this law. We've already got the ballots. They're ready to go. We start mailing out to everybody else that requested a ballot by mail.
Well, there you see it from Ernie Robertson, the Caddo Parish Registrar of Voters, been doing this 25 plus years. And you can see that the final day to register to vote is right around the corner, October the 11th. And then all of a sudden, November the 8th is your voting day. And you need to be registered to vote. CaddoVoter.org is your official website right here in Caddo Parish, CaddoVoter.org. Ernie Robertson, by the way, Ernie, I guess you're ready to man the phones. And do they still have a major question they ask?
Oh, yeah. 92% of the calls is the same question. Where do I vote? It's going to be coming in on Election Day, and we handle 1,000 to 1,100 phone calls that day with 4 phone lines. That's all the employees I have for that. And I've got to tell you, Tom, having CaddoVoter.org has actually helped us handle that better, because even the poll commissioners are using CaddoVoter.org or GoVote.com to get to the Secretary of State's computer. And for everybody that's got a smartphone, if you're standing in line and they tell you your name's not on the phone, your name's not on the poll book, look it up on your phone, because you'll know where you go to vote when you look at CaddoVoter.org.
Well, there you have it, your latest fall election 2016 update from the Caddo Registrar of Voters, Ernie Robertson. I'm Tom Pace. See you at the polls.